The Xenomorph, also known as the Internecivus raptus, is a fictional alien from the Alien franchise of movies, comics, toys, and games. Its original design was inspired by a 1976 piece of nightmarish artwork by the legendary H.R. Giger called Necronom 4, before constantly being changed between movies to become the ultimate horror franchise in space. The Xenomorphs are a vicious, relentless, and savage animalistic species who look after their one fertile queen that can lay a consistent number of eggs, which when hatched, give birth to acid blood-filled venom-like creatures better known as facehuggers who impregnate their victims by clinging onto their head and wrapping their tail around the neck of their prey before a new Xenomorph is born by violently breaking through the chest of the host, and the cycle begins again. Its original appearance was seen in the 1979 science fiction horror movie Alien, and since then has bounced back and forth between horror and action, featured in every single medium imaginable. The Predator, also known as Yucha or Hishkuten, is yet another fictional alien species from the Predator franchise, originally designed by Stan Winston with a little help from James Cameron. Just like the Xenomorphs, the appearance and characteristics of these characters can change slightly depending on which movie, game, toy or comic you are indulging in. They are a loyal but deadly tribe of advanced technology used to cloak themselves and creep up on who they plan to kill for sport. They collect trophies of their prey. They never fight the ill, the unarmed, the weak or the pregnant, but anyone else is fair game. Everything they do tends to be for the honour of their tribe, and failure is simply not an option. Willing to take their own life and hopefully those around them with a self-destruct mechanism in case things go bad. Now, just to be clear, angry commenters out there, this is obviously a very brief rundown of these two iconic franchises. Even I will admit, the backstory, the lore, and the devotion to these incredible IPs goes a lot deeper than this. But the joining of these two franchises was always something that fans of either or both wanted, and as you know, they did in fact get, for better or worse. Is it a case of be careful what you wish for? Most definitely. However, from time to time, something truly special does indeed happen, and guys, never have I done a history in the games video to date that is this mixed. The Aliens vs Predator franchise has some insane highs, but at the same time, some pretty horrific lows. And today, not only will I cover all of these titles, but more importantly, I plan to go back to where it all began for the world of Alien vs Predator and discuss how it all came about in this Aliens vs Predator, the history and the games. Mike Richardson, you may remember him from the Mask History in the Games video that I made a while back, but in case you need a quick refresher, Mike is the CEO, the owner, the OG, the man and the legend behind Dark Horse Comics. Probably most well known for their Hellboy and Sin City comics, this legendary comic book publisher, as you may have guessed, were also the people behind Alien vs Predator. Now, the origin story was actually pretty simple. Mike and his team were in a meeting one day trying to come up with a comic book crossover franchise that would work and therefore sell. They were already known for their Alien comics, a series that was a rather risky one to take on for the company, as previous movie tie-ins from other publishers had not done so well. However, Aliens was in fact a huge seller for Dark Horse, constantly requiring them to go back to the printers to make a second, third, fourth and God knows how many other print runs to meet demand. The franchise did so well that the company quickly looked at what franchise they could take on next, and it was in 1988 Predator, a movie released only 1 year prior, was the obvious choice. The team at Dark Horse had seen the trailer, they ran to see the movie and saw it as the perfect fit for print. Predator, as you would expect, also did very well in comic book form, and when DC got in touch proposing the possibility for the two companies to do a crossover, Dark Horse got to thinking about what would be the best versus battle. The team pushed around idea after idea after idea, but nothing was working. It was then during a break, on the toilet actually, that editor and artist at Dark Horse, Chris Warner, who was already known for working on the Predator series, sat there and got to thinking about all of the possible crossovers they could play with. And then suddenly, Alien is owned by Fox, Predator is owned by Fox, Dark Horse were the publishers of both franchises. Let's do it! He jumped up, wiped, washed his hands for 20 seconds, ran to tell the guys, everybody loved it, and within minutes, Mike Richardson rang the big boss at Fox and simply shouted, "Alien versus Predator," down the phone. And the response he got was, King Kong versus Godzilla. Cool! And it was as simple as that. Within only 20 minutes, Dark Horse had just merged together their two awesome otherworldly franchises into a battle to end all battles. For this story to work, a few ground rules had to be put in place. It was decided that the franchise would be set in the Alien timeline, and that the Predators, a species obsessed with the hunting of the biggest and best fish that they can get, would love nothing more than going up against these ultimately absurdly crazy strong and powerful beings, the aliens. They had the ships to do so, they had the ability to do so, everything just worked. It was decided that a queen would be captured by the Predators, her alien eggs would then be farmed off and flown around the galaxy, resulting in the Predators' ultimate rite of passage being that of finding and taking down these incredibly adaptive creatures. And hey, if some of those alien bastards make their way to Earth and us humans get in the way, then so be it. The popular success of this comic run resulted in plenty of reprints being issued, and eventually the crossover became so popular that it gained itself the title of most successful direct sales market in history up to that point, outside of Marvel and DC, of course. The marketing execs at Fox loved it, and as a result, when the second movie in the Predator franchise was put out, a small nod was given to the growing AVP fanbase by adding the alien skull as a trophy for the Predators in the 1990 Danny Glover flick Predator 2. This was the first instance of the possibility of an Alien vs Predator movie. Preparations were actually already underway by this point, but the timing was just not right. However, it actually wasn't the movie that propelled the Alien vs Predator franchise to begin with. As you probably already know, it was the video games. 1993 saw the release of the last of his clan for the Game Boy. There was no age-rated certificate, and just like most big sci-fi based movie franchises of the 80s, even though we couldn't watch them as kids by law, we sure as hell could get toys and play games like this, unfortunately. Now, if we are going to get the good out of the way first, for an original Game Boy title, it actually looks rather good. The storyline fits well with the comics, the clan has all but died, and you, as the title suggests, are the last one. As you explore the levels, a map is, well, mapped out along the top of the screen, which is a really nice touch if you ask me. And best of all, it's fairly easy and responsive to control. In the game, you very slowly make your way around these maze-like levels, finding keys that open doors and moving on. Each level plays like a very limited Metroid game, requiring you to find weapons, some of which are required if you want to make bigger jumps or blast through walls to continue on your journey to the Queen. It's a hard game to suggest, it's far from bad, but it's incredibly stiff, incredibly repetitive, and I doubt you'll want to play much more than just the one time. However, what came next definitely changed all of that. For the most part. The Super Nintendo release of Alien vs Predator, or Aliens vs Predator for some reason in Japan, on the Super Famicom, is not, and I repeat, not a port of the arcade game. It's its own game, and a very average one at that. The game isn't terrible, it's definitely playable, it's just that it's very bland, something that simply shouldn't be the case when playing as the Predator in a side-scrolling beat-em-up. Not a lot happens in the game, the backgrounds are boring, the layout is boring, and the enemies, for the most part, are not all that hard to beat, and you guessed it, very boring. They seem to have these huge life bars that take forever to drop. You can of course get them down with easily timed punches, but nothing much really happens during that time. You know, just knock 'em down, wait, knock 'em down, wait, knock 'em down. You get the idea. The Japanese version does have a 2-player mode though, so that's quite a nice little extra for you to have a little one-on-one fight with Alien vs Predator. It's pretty good for what it is, but again, nothing special and definitely nothing like the arcade game by Capcom. Now, the arcade game was based on the first draft of a script for the movie that sadly just never got made. That script was of course heavily inspired by the comics, but by the time it was rejected, the game was actually already finished. As you can see, the game is absolutely stunning, the perfect representation of what an Alien vs Predator game should feel like. It's a 3-player side-scrolling beat-em-up game with huge sprites, an absurd amount of enemies on the screen, and Dutch is back. You know, Dutch, Arnold Schwarzenegger from the first movie. Well, okay, it's not actually Arnold himself because he's gone and got himself a mechanical arm for some reason, but come on, in video game form, that's pretty cool. By this point, at this early stage, the Alien vs Predator franchise had bounced around quite a bit, and although this game story-wise might not exactly be canon, it is still, in my opinion, the perfect representation of Alien vs Predator. And although it may be, you know, just another brawler, it's actually one of the best at getting everything it needs to right. Sure, by the later half of the game, especially the final level, it may seem so incredibly frantic that it's hard to keep up, but by this point you have pretty much learnt how to live with it, and it's one of those games that looks insane to watch and almost unplayable, but the pacing and the longevity of each stage and boss feels just about right to keep even the most hardcore of gamers on the edge of their seat without crossing that line. You will have a great time with this game, a game that by all accounts is the most requested game to ever get an HD remake from Capcom themselves, because outside of the arcades, the only real release of this in the home market was via the Capcom home arcade unit. Although it is worth noting that a port of the game was originally planned for release on the 32X, but like most planned games, the system's poor sales resulted in the game being canned. Why Capcom seemed to constantly refuse the release of this title has baffled fans to this day. It reaches the top 3 of countless top 10 beat-em-ups of all time, and its gameplay and style was so fierce back in the day that it was used as inspiration by a couple of different teams that worked on games such as Guardian Heroes and River City Ransom Underground. Another 2 fantastic games. Out of every single game we're going to be talking about today in this episode, the arcade release of Alien vs Predator is the only one that would be a surefire hit for gamers of all tastes, although with that said, we still have plenty of great games to cover. Starting with the Atari Lynx game called Aliens vs Predator. Seriously, the names of these games are so annoying when doing a video like this. Now, this game was never released or finished. Thankfully, several ROMs do exist for this title and can be found online, all with different pros and cons that we can assume, would have all been merged together all nicely for the game's release. The game has a great eerie look and feel, the sound design is pretty horrifying in a good way, and I think if this title was released then it would have been a must-get for the little handheld. It's a rather gloomy looking first-person shooter type game that doesn't take advantage of the system's bitmap scaling software like the Wolfenstein 3D tech demo does, and because of that, although the game was actually pretty stunning with its smooth running back and forward, turning left and right is done in 180-degree chunks. Now unfortunately, the unfinished ROMs do not actually have any proper fighting between the characters, but still, it's a really nice looking start that bizarrely didn't make it any further than this. Why? Because all of the efforts by this point had moved to the upcoming Atari Jaguar. Now originally, that next Atari Jaguar game was actually going to be closer to the Super Nintendo brawler, but James Hampton, the producer, wanted to take the franchise further for the new system and showcase not only what the Jaguar could do, but also represent the Alien vs Predator franchise in a more loyal way. And the way he did just that was to get Jane Whittaker involved, who had worked directly with H.R. Geiger, the original Alien designer, on the PC horror game Dark Seed. And between them, after discussing the exact movements and characteristics of the characters, it was decided that a game based from the viewpoint of both Alien, Predator and the humans would be the best way to go. Although by doing this, they would technically need to make 3 games in one on the same cartridge, and even though we did the math, a first-person shooter this big on the Atari Jaguar was still no easy feat to accomplish.
Introducing Alien vs. Predator for the 64-bit Atari Jaguar. You might not want to play it alone.
Ah! Mom.
Titles such as Doom, Wolfenstein, among many others, were already proving popular among more hardcore gamers, and Alien vs Predator on the Jaguar was indeed the ultimate system seller. The game was incredibly action-packed, the environments had never looked this good in a first-person shooter, especially on a console before, and by 1994 standards, it really was the closest thing to playing a realistic sci-fi movie that we had got to this date. To achieve this, the team at Rebellion came up with a clever trick of photographing the characters with the walls and the weapons and then scanning them in, adding a bit of shading and all that sort of stuff to create a sort of realistic motion capture look and style, thankfully just like the old sci-fi movies from the 80s did all those years ago. This clever trick, mixed together with the best lighting and visual effects that were available at the time, gave this game a unique and therefore futuristic look that the competition struggled to compete with. The survival horror-esque scenarios where you play as a marine trying to plant the self-destruct device and flee the maze-like level is a brilliant mode and mixes up with the go insane style of the Alien mode, which is just simply brutal and incredibly fun with the more stealthy Predator sections. The Alien is easily the weakest of the 3, but that's okay because you can plant other aliens into killed marines for you to take over when you die. And Predator is also quite a lot of fun. Your main objective is to defeat the Queen, but obviously along the way, you need to act like a Predator and take down enemies in this very light stealth game. All in all, although it looks and plays a little clunky by today's standards, there's no denying the game was mighty impressive for the time, and it's easy to see why so many gamers were jealous of this title when compared to stuff like Alien Trilogy, which, although good, I personally don't think has the same atmosphere as this, and yet that game came out 2 years later. The game proved to be so popular that a couple of sequels were planned and ultimately cancelled. One for the Atari Jaguar CD peripheral and one for the never-to-be-released Atari Jaguar VR headset. Thankfully, the guys at Rebellion did end up working on a follow-up to this game, and they didn't hold back. Aliens, plural, vs Predator for the PC was expected to be released by Christmas of 1997, 3 years after the Jaguar hit, but it wouldn't be released until April and May of 1999. Originally designed to be put out on both PC and consoles, including one report stating that a Dreamcast port was planned, however eventually all efforts went to the PC. As you can see, the game is a huge step up from the game released 5 years prior. Just like last time, the game lets you take control of the crazy fast and lethal alien species. The Predator sections are far more stealthy, mixed with good typical first-person action, and the Marines are of course a lot more of that good first-person action fun. Seriously, you thought the series was good before? This was the perfect way to bring all 3 gameplay styles to the forefront, and do it in a way that even to this day is an absolute blast to play through. Sure, the missions are for the most part the same, but the way you get to the finish line with each character is drastically different and forces you to change up your gameplay style. The sections in between the hardcore action can be a little bit nerve-wracking too, never knowing when those Xenomorphs will literally come blasting through the walls, ready to completely swarm you. If you're looking for a horror action game, then this is slowly becoming a bit of a forgotten gem in that genre. Today, these games are easy to find and play on modern PCs, with the Gold Edition that includes the Millennium Expansion Pack, which includes a few extra multiplayer levels, a couple of guns, and a save feature, one of the original game's biggest issues. In fact, you can pick up this updated Classic 2000 edition for only £3.99 on Steam. And nope, this is not on offer. Is it worth getting? Well, my guess is that if you've made it this far into the video, you're a big enough fan to warrant a massive yes.
Come on. Do it. Do it! Come on. Come on. Come on! Do it now!
So far, we've covered some incredible Alien vs Predator games. 3 games, in fact, that I think are well worth checking out. And by this point, the franchise had completely solidified itself as a fan favourite of both Alien and Predator franchises. Behind the scenes in the movie world, John Davis had spent the best part of 5 years gaining the rights to create a movie that would fuse these two worlds together, and thankfully Fox would eventually give him the opportunity around about the same time. He would then listen to movie pitch after movie pitch after movie pitch, but never found the right story or guy to take it on. So whilst John spends the next couple of years looking for Mr. Right, let's look at what Rebellion was doing. A sequel, right? Well, actually, no, not yet at least. They were still working on that expansion pack which left Fox Interactive with Sierra getting hold of a different development studio for the sequel, and that studio was Monolith Productions. Thankfully, Fox did the right thing. Monolith are the guys you may know nowadays as the developers of the Fear franchise, and more importantly for this video, in the year 2000, released No One Lives Forever, a game that used the same Liftech game engine, albeit a much earlier version, for this Alien vs Predator sequel. The team made sure to work with Fox closely on this title, gaining themselves stock footage from the movies and studying the lore of not only the games but the comics too, and as a result created something truly special. For fans of the Marine missions, this was the perfect follow-up for the series. Sure, it's technically the same style as before, but this time the added storyline that brilliantly intertwines between all 3 campaigns really does add something that none of the other games before it were able to achieve. That said, as you no doubt have seen countless times in reviews for the time, the Marines are by far the best of the 3 campaigns. The Predator feels weak in comparison to what came before, and the Alien, although not as bad, is extremely repetitive and runs itself rather short compared to its human foes. Still, it is a fun game, and you will still want to play through all 3 more than any other game before it, and possibly any after it too, again due to that amazing intertwining storyline. And thankfully Fox and Sierra followed up on this with Primal Hunt, an expansion which acts as a prequel to AVP2 created by yet another studio, Third Law Interactive. And unlike the original AVP2, taking the established Rebellion franchise to another studio wasn't exactly the best option in this instance. Obviously this is just an expansion, but my god is it a small one. Taking no more than an hour or 2 per campaign, the main goal here is to basically kill, kill, kill. You're going to be spending most of your time in that short 2-hour time frame, shooting massive waves of enemies that try and get in your way. It's cool for 10 minutes and pretty boring almost instantly after that. This expansion really is for people that love AVP2 so much that they want more, and even though more is definitely what you got, you just don't get a lot of it. It's a pretty basic expansion that, unlike the others covered so far, I doubt I will ever play again. After this, another cancelled game just sort of happened for the Game Boy Advance by Ubisoft. Literally nothing is known about this game besides this one quote. This game allows players to experience numerous levels of action and terror. And that's it. No screenshots, no gameplay ideas, nothing. They only had the franchise up until about 2003, and for whatever reason, this project just went cold, with AVP Extinction being the next game in the series for PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox. Now, this one is pretty average. Not gonna lie, I had fun with it to a degree. It was definitely better than I thought. I just quickly realised that I'd seen enough pretty early on, which made me just not want to continue. What you've got here is an RTS based in the Alien vs Predator world, and obviously when these sort of things happen with characters as evil and brutally hard as the ones found in the Alien vs Predator franchise, you end up having to make killing them rather quick and easy. There really isn't much to this game, and the scores for the time reflect that, with it getting pretty much 6 out of 10s all round, with the biggest gripes being that the game feels incredibly rushed. Sadly, you can sense that a good game can be found deep within this game, but it's incredibly basic with no skirmish or online multiplayer popping up to help the game along. Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about this one, guys. Nor should you worry about Alien vs Predator, or Alien vs Predator. Both for mobile Java devices, and both seriously suck. It took me a good hour or so to find these ROMs to get this footage, and I'm starting to think that I wasted my time. They were rushed, they deserved no more than 1 minute of your time at most, and they were both designed to coincide with the movie. Oh yes, it's 2004 and John Davis had just managed to get himself his perfect guy to make an Alien vs Predator movie. Paul W.S. Anderson was that guy who John saw as the perfect guy to take it on. He was an avid fan of both franchises. He brought the franchise to Earth, well, the Alien franchise anyway, and did this by setting it deep below Antarctica to help give off that typical claustrophobic and eerily dark and spooky feel. I remember when I first saw this movie and was literally laughing out loud at the, spoiler alert here guys, the Predator and the humans teaming up to take on the Xenomorphs. Like, what? At the time, I didn't really have that much knowledge of the comics, and all I'd played was the games, but seeing this sort of thing happen in a movie, it not only made me laugh, but it also really tipped me off. The same way the T-Rex was used by the humans to help them in Jurassic World, or the way that the slow music comes in when Freddy dies in the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street. I don't want that sort of thing to happen. You should never feel sorry or use pure evil to help you in your storyline. Yet, it's happening right here. The reason the originals of both the Alien and Predator franchises are so good is because these monsters that are coming to get you are so incredibly fierce, there is absolutely no way you're ever going to get away from them. And even though I do believe a great AVP movie can be made, this sort of let's team up with pure evil to take on the Xenomorphs with a shot of them running together practically hand in hand is why you shouldn't always wish for every single video game or comic storyline to be turned into a movie. Sometimes these storylines just work because of the medium they were originally presented. Now with that rant out the way, if you actually go into this movie with the mindset of it not being canon, then what you'll end up getting is actually quite a fine movie. Don't expect excellence or genre-defining storytelling like you got with Alien and Predator. Watch it for what it is. I'm glad this movie exists because it does actually look bloody good when they're going up against each other still to this day, due to it not all being CGI, and yeah, it is actually a little bit of a guilty pleasure. The sort of thing that I have on whilst I'm doing something else, like playing Alien vs Predator games, right? Well, sadly, as we're going in time order, there are actually 2 more mobile games that we need to look at next. Alien vs Predator 3D actually got above average reviews, terrible by today's standards of course, but it was at least mildly impressive for phones to pull this sort of thing off for the time. And then of course in 2007 you had yet another mobile game called Alien vs Predator 2 2D Requiem. Again, I can't really complain about this too much. It's a Java game and does what it needs, keeping your fingers busy when you're on the bog. An online flash game that's no longer available called Alien vs Predator Requiem Combat Evolved also got put out at this time and was essentially a terrible Rampage clone. And Japan also got themselves a pachinko title too. Aren't we lucky? And as you may have already noticed, we've actually already started covering games for the lead up of Alien vs Predator 2 Requiem the movie. Now, unlike the first movie that's fun for what it is, AVP 2 is like one of those direct-to-DVD movies that you can pick up in a supermarket. It was a rushed movie, a movie that was pitched and rejected before the original movie, and it's because of this that the original idea had to be shoehorned into this new storyline that the first movie had set up with a smaller budget and less time to do so. Also, the movie was rated R, and even though that sounds good for the fight scenes, it's really not. I promise you, go back and watch both of these movies and you'll see how much better the original AVP looked compared to this extremely dark and bland sequel. Also, not to give too much away, but this concept of Alien vs Predator 2 feels like it's set in a completely different horror movie setting than it should be. Let this sink in for a moment. This is an Alien vs Predator movie set on Earth. Okay. But it's also complete with jocks, nerds falling for cheerleaders, and cops going up against their duty to investigate on their own to discover what is really going on. See what I mean? Is this Alien vs Predator, or is this High School Musical the horror movie? It's a terrible idea. The kind of idea that you come up with when you're drunk with your mates nerding out before you all suddenly realise, no, that's actually a really, really bad idea. I'm annoyed I had to watch this movie for this video, and again, it got games based on it. I already showcased some rather crappy mobile games, but also, you've got AVP Requiem for the PSP. And just like the movie, you get to play as the Predator in a world that completely doesn't suit it. Just look at this. It feels like a sprite swap to Bully or something. Thankfully, it actually plays quite well, and that's all I've really got to say about this game. It's such a boring game. Never do you feel threatened by the Xenomorphs coming to attack. They just sort of appear, you swipe them, and you move on. Seriously, send them in, who cares? For hardcore collectors of games in the franchise, you know, it's not terrible, it just sort of exists. It's a game that's stupidly easy to play, and considering you are playing as and going up against the most evil being in existence, it really should feel more thrilling than this. It should feel a lot more like Aliens vs Predator, created by the original team and put out by Sega. This game looks fantastic. Yet again, you choose to play as the Marines, the Xenomorphs, or the Predator, and let me tell you, going up against Xenomorphs in a dark metallic tunnel never looked so good. The way they bounce from wall to attack you in large swarms never gets old. It truly is a sight to behold. It's proof that slapping an 18 certificate rating onto a movie doesn't necessarily work for all movies, but in games, it's insane to witness and makes you feel incredibly on edge and or badass when pulling off these ridiculous takedowns. The Predator missions I actually enjoyed a fair bit, but the Alien missions, well, they are just different. Not as good, definitely not as good as Rebellion's previous work, they're just different. Gone is the go crazy blasting through enemies for the most part, as in this game you'll find yourself being sneaky, luring people in and taking them down in secret. Now you may be thinking to yourself, is Slopes praising that 2010 Rebellion game that was completely panned? Yes I am. It's nowhere near as bad as people make out. Its biggest problem is that it's nowhere near as good as the previous games, but still, I did have fun playing through this when I got it on the cheap. Now that being said, I do understand why people are not fans of this title. It had a lot to live up to. It's a very unpolished game, and in the incredibly short amount of time it will take you to complete it, you will notice numerous things that could be and should be improved. These were more annoying than game breaking if you ask me, but yeah, again, people had waited this long and this game is what they got. If the original games didn't exist, this game would actually still score pretty averagely, but it definitely wouldn't be sitting under its former shadow's glory. The death animations are great to witness, albeit rather repetitive, and I still think Predator was pretty fun to play, most definitely towards the very end of the game when you're completely suited up. In short, it's good, simple, average fun that I genuinely didn't mind playing again for this video. Although I will say that may have been due to the amount of rather hefty patches that were released after the game came out, which heavily improved the controls. Don't be put off by internet hatred, just know what this game is. It's perfectly okay. Nothing more, nothing less. And only for fans that have played the many better games on this list already wanting something more. Leaving one final game to talk about, and this one's for mobile phones. What you have here is a 3D brawler that actually doesn't feel all that bad. In my opinion, it's actually better than the PSP outing, but the enjoyment of playing quickly wears thin with repetitive gameplay choices and, you guessed it, insane amounts of grinding in order to upgrade or, of course, pay money to do so instead. Annoyingly, if the developers cleaned up these typical annoyances and released it for something like the Vita or maybe even a Nintendo handheld, you would actually have a pretty solid title here. Sadly, it falls down the same hole that plagues all games of this style, and that is of course complete and utter desperate attempts at getting you to pay more throughout the entire game, which is even more annoying considering you will actually have to pay to buy the app in the first place. Thankfully, later updates to the game iron some of these issues out apparently, but considering I only ever played the patched version and I'm still complaining about it, it doesn't take a genius to work out that very little was ever done. A sad ending to a very, very bumpy ride, because this could have been good. Alien vs Predator is a series with many highs and many lows. Some games are excellent, some are terrible, some comics are very clever and others are generic. Some movies are surprising and others are also surprising for different reasons. Still, there's no denying that this franchise that merges together two insanely well-crafted universes isn't going away anytime soon. Action figures are available, board games are available, novels, theme park attractions with Halloween Horror Nights, you've got virtual pinball and DLC for completely different games, keeping this franchise alive. A franchise that is so strong that it doesn't matter when the average game gets pumped out. Seriously, that 2010 title hit the top of the charts and stayed there for a good amount of time. Alien vs Predator as a franchise is that respected, simply because we care about this merging so goddamn much, bringing further meaning to the phrase, whoever wins, we lose. Hey there guys, thanks for checking out Alien vs Predator, the history and the games. This was supposed to be a bit of a shorter episode after last week's huge movie-length Dizzy history video, but yeah, there was a lot more Alien vs Predator games than I originally expected. Regardless, I had a lot of fun making this one. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know down below which is your favourite in the series. It's going to be between 1999 and the arcade release, isn't it? For me, it's the arcade release. Definitely. Now, this is the part of the video where I give a massive shout out to all of the Patreons and YouTube members that help me make videos like this every single week on the channel, sometimes more. In fact, I think this week coming you'll see 2 videos from me. Let's give a massive shout out to the following awesome people: Aaron Gorman, Andrew Dalton, Andrew Ward, Arista, Benjamin Guy, Big Rico, Bram Perez, Brandon Gold, C64 Television, Caesar, Cheshire One, Chris the Rottweiler, Clan Bob, Conrad Constantine, Cromella, David Terrazes, David Yaron, Dina81, Dr. J, expert in moonology, Elf Daughtercrafts, Game Apologist, Gary Pinkett, Holly Samantha, Hut, Intrigued Gaming, Jay is Manchild, Jabba Al Aiden, Jacob P, aka Avalon James, Jeff Ladd, Jeff Mianowski, Jeremy Rodriguez, Jonathan Hayward, Kevin King, Kinglink Reviews, Lucas Softal, Lips, Man of God 9000, Marcus Kingimo Cut Tyndall, Michael Towns, Mike Martin, Mind of the Unsane, Mr. Golden, Nicholas Bertner, Nick Pollard, Nightwill, Petty Mew, Pretendo64, RetroReversing.com, Retro to Next Gen aka Lou, Richard Alderjic, Richard Carter aka Fantastic Dizzy, Rocket Plod, Ronnie Method SSWB, Rovan Army, Ryan Holt, Sashi Dog, Samuel Nielsen, Shadow Dragon, Solix Captor, Stephen, Taylor Rainwater, That Gamer, The Cunning Linguist, The Shaded J, Tim Labonte, Tim Lund, Todd Paul Float G, Trans Rights, Vike Echo, Wobbles and Bean, The Wonder Ducks, and Ye Old Hamburglar. Like I said, these guys help me make videos every single week on this channel, and without them, there probably wouldn't be a channel. So thank you all so much for supporting the show, and if you guys want to do the exact same thing that all of these awesome people are doing right here, then of course, links will be down in the description. But anyway, hope you liked the video, guys. This is DJ Slope signing out, and hopefully I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.